Hello, and welcome back to Fusion Writing, where building character meets creating structure. Today is our map day where we go a little bit more into detail in our subject for the week, which is how we use our Zettelkastens to help ourselves with our writing. And without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Victoria for her Zettelkasten segment. Victoria?
Hello, everyone. Welcome back. I'm so happy to see so many people here. And you think I can't see you, but I can because I know you're there because you talked to me in the comments. So it's good to have you back. Today for the map, you may recall last week we did a module on microfiction. And I gave you two examples, the 6-word story and the 100-word story, which is often called drabble. And you can go down all kinds of crazy rabbit holes about where these forms came from and how they've evolved, but you don't have to do that because it's in my book, Zettelkasten for Fiction Writers. So as I continue unearthing these forms, I'm packing them into the book with lots of examples so that you can start experimenting. Because here's what I've learned. We all, as writers, start in the same place. We start with a blank page. So for this week, as we're talking about our Zettelkasten and how those pieces fit together, the important thing is to remember everything becomes potential material. Well, what do I mean by that? What I mean is you, my friends, if you're doing your job, are always carrying note cards around with you. At least I am. And one of my favorite sections is 1150/14. It's what I call the experience collector. Sometimes I also refer to it as a scene generator. And this is not new by any stretch. One of the most famous proponents of this is the short story writer Lydia Davis. She started doing this in the 70s when she was living in Paris as a young woman. Every morning she would wake up, she would sit at her breakfast table, and she would record everything that she saw, smelled, touched, tasted. She literally captured everything in her environment every morning. What she found over time is that these little slices, I like to call them slices of life, became the building blocks for the stories that she would write. So the reason that's cool for you is, number one, if you're populating your cards like you're supposed to be and collecting those little observations, those little experiences, things that resonate with you, things that you might have an idea about, but you have no idea what you're going to do with it, that's your experience collection. It can be something you see, something you taste, a smell, a sensory experience. It doesn't matter. Just get that stuff onto the cards. Assign it a number. Like I said, mine is 1150, and the /14 indicates that it's chapter 14 in the book I'm writing, so I can always find those cards when I need them. But what I'm giving you in the book is, I think there's 72, if I remember right, different scenes or prompts, generators to get you thinking about what kinds of things am I going to record? Because people, you sit down, you look around and you go, well, there's nothing interesting here. That's absolutely not true. There's tons of interesting things around you if you just collect the experience. And it has to be while it's happening. That's one of the keys. So that's pro tip 1. Capture that thing while you're in the middle of it, because I promise you will not recall the critical pieces later. You won't remember when you were sitting the way that the fabric of your sweater felt on your arm and why you noticed that. You won't remember that as you were sitting, when you turned on the desk lamp, there was a slight smell of dust as the lamp heated up with the warmth from the bulb, right? Those are cool details, but if you don't capture them in the experience, you're not going to remember that stuff later. Your mind is going to gloss right over it because it's busy focusing on the big important things, not the little experiences around you. So that is my tip for this week for your Zettelkasten. Start collecting your experiences in the moment. And the cool thing is, any free moment in time can become writing time. If you're sitting in the car, in the drive-thru, picking up your dry cleaning or waiting on your kids at school, that's 7 found minutes that you can pull out that little deck of cards. You know, often I have one of my little mobile decks with me that's just clipped together with a bulldog clip. Pull out those little cards and start capturing those things. Because then what you're going to find is when you get to step 2. And that's what I like to call the drafting. Some people call it the rough drafting, the zero draft. There's a lot of ways to describe this. But it's just that initial placing the pen on the paper to start the first inklings of that story. So what are you going to do? Well, maybe you're going to pull one of those experiences that you've collected, and you're going to start with the dusty, warm smell from the lamp bulb as it warms up. And that's going to be the first thing that brings that reader into your story. Whether you're talking about a 50-word story, a 6-word story, a 100-word story, or 1,000 words, any of those microfiction pieces can depart with one of those single experiences. And here's the third and final tip. The cool thing about that is, once you get those drafted out, maybe you've drafted 4 separate sections in 100-word sprints, all right? Then you're going to look at that as a whole and start to think about, what kind of connective tissue do I need if I want to take these 4 independent pieces and string them together into a larger work? Well, maybe all you need is some kind of opening or introduction that sets the tone for those scenes. And then you need some kind of a conclusion that maybe thematically connects it all together. And then you start doing that editing work of making the pieces play off of one another. It's a very intuitive and simple process, but that can be a road from something that's just an observation that's captured in your cards. Let it simmer. Then you're going to draft it into something maybe 50 or 100 words. And then once you have a few of those, then you're going to look at the whole and see how you can string those together to create maybe a larger story, or even something as long as a novella or a novel. There's a whole form for that, and I'm going to teach you that over in the book. But for our purposes here, follow those 3 tips. Collect your experiences, sit down and do your drafting, and then look at the whole and see if maybe there's something you can work with there. I think as you lay out the cards and start to look at, what have I observed this week? You're going to be really surprised at the kinds of ideas that bubble up and give you that push into the writing. Because at the end of the day, that's what fusion writing is all about. It's about getting the words on the page because they won't stay in your head forever. So that is my advice. Collect those experiences and start doing some drafting and see where it takes you. You might find yourself in some place you entirely expected, or you might find yourself in an entirely different place. Either way, you've gotten your writing done. So with that, I will throw it back over to Kathleen to chime in with how this applies to character observations. Kathleen?
Oh my gosh, do we ever dovetail this week? Well, Victoria is talking to you about capturing senses and smells and experiences and what things sound like, the clank of the dishes while that author was sitting in the cafe, the smell of the toast, everything and the experiences. I want you to capture a different kind of experience, maybe on a different day. I want you to capture, how is the waitress carrying herself? Is she sassy and flirty with the customers, or is she kind of down and dragging, and every step is difficult? What about the people sitting at the table? What can you see just in casual motions and movements of people that are total strangers? What can you pick up on the character? What about the guy that's sitting talking on his telephone very loud so that everyone in the restaurant can understand how much money he's making? Just capture some of these crazy people. Then when that conversation interrupts your meal, you're not going to be saying, "Oh, what's the matter with that guy?" You're going to get out your card. Man, he's going to show up. You can capture personalities and emotions, and how do they show up in a person's demeanor? What can you possibly, you're a fiction writer. What story can you invent for that person that would bring them to that moment with that expression on their face, with that demeanor carried in their body? And if you need some clues, of course, you have my book, I'm sure, Writing with Emotion, and you can get one of the most fascinating places to start with all this is right in the middle, when I lay out all the character traits by what you observe. And that's another game you can play. You can build out cards for yourself with each of these character traits and bring them with you so that you can have them handy. I happen to have some cards, for example, to show you how I would organize the character traits. So you can build out cards for each of the character traits that show you from this book what the character is battling against, and you can flip through those. Maybe you'll even want to make a little bunny ring out of them, and so that you can look through them more discreetly and make up a story. This is when you get back to story writing for can you imagine trying to do a 6-word story to capture that guy on the cell phone who doesn't know? Well, just think about it. Try to put 6 words together that captures that person perfectly. Well, now let's give him 100 words. What more can you say in 100 words? What more can you say about that waitress in 100 words? This will be your story clips area. Now, Victoria has you capturing them in a certain section in her Zettelkasten. I use 4310 to capture characters in my world, but you can use any set of numbers that you want. The beauty of having a number system like that is you need a space in your Zettelkasten where you can just drop things in and let them go. There has to be a space in your Zettelkasten where you can capture ideas without the burden of, oh, I've got to give it a proper number and, oh, I've got to index it properly, which doesn't mean you might not index it. If you've got something in there that's just a gem, you might want to be careful to index it. But if it's just a little idea that you're throwing in there that you're going to sort through later, feel free to have that area where you can just drop in an idea and start capturing those characters. The more you start watching people behave in the real world, the more you will be able to start connecting behaviors to a plausible storyline. Now, we don't have to psychoanalyze these people. We might have it all wrong, but it's okay because we're writing fiction. It only has to match with. So we can invent the wildest story imaginable. The person who's all excited on the telephone might have just met a little green man yesterday, and it might be a sci-fi story. We have all the freedom in the world as fiction writers to match the characters that we see in the wild when we're out walking around with a story that goes with them. So I hope you will have a lot of fun looking at the people that you see in your environment. Anything to add, Victoria? How would you sum this up?
Just one thing. I'm so glad that you showed that spread in your book where the character trait bubbles are, because I'll give you an extra pro tip. When I was working early on in my novel, that was indispensable, because here's what I did. I pretty much drafted the whole thing through, and then I went back and I started looking at my characters and thinking, this character needs a little spice. They need just a little, a weakness I can poke them in, or, whatever thing you need to add. For me, that is an excellent opportunity to use the character trait charts, because you already know this person. You know how you want to write them. You have a good sense of who they are, but you need that little extra spice. So reviewing those trait charts, having them on cards so you can flip through them and maybe pull out one that you think might work, absolutely indispensable. I cannot recommend it enough, because it solved some character problems for me, and it gave me a different way of looking at them. And often that can reveal something that you wouldn't even have thought of, but because you have those graphs, you can review them and come up with those things that maybe you would not have come up with otherwise. So I highly recommend that. It's an extremely useful tool. So get Kathleen's book if you don't have it. And finally, visit us over at LiLLiPub.org, because that's where we hang out on Saturdays and we talk about these lessons and we share and workshop what we're working on. It's an absolute blast. And so do come over. We start the workshop at 1 p.m. Central, but I put the feed up an hour prior, and we have an hour of free writing together. So come join us, share what you're writing, and let us engage in this conversation further throughout the week, because that's where we'll be.
That's right. LiLLiPub.org. Come on over and join us. We have a number of circles of special interest as well. We have our fusion writing there, and you can get some special handouts. We'll give you additional material besides what you hear in our courses, and you can get links to all of the videos that way in the order in which they were presented. And also over in LiLLiPub.org, we have a whole section called the Circle for Zettelkasten, where we talk about how our Zettelkastens are organized. And you can also find a circle for character traits, where I talk about the various character traits, so you can ask your questions over there. So we have lots of special interest groups over there. The library is always fun. Drop into the library, talk about the book you're reading, and enjoy some pleasant company. It's one of the most congenial social media groups that I've ever encountered. So see see you over there. Anything else, or shall we say goodbye?
Nope.
Okay.
Thanks again for joining us. We'll see you.
Okay, wait, I have a special announcement. Next week, we have an honored guest. For the first time, we are bringing a guest presenter on, and this is Vanessa Sperling is going to share with us how she goes about using Substack for her writing and how it can be an advantageous tool for you as well as just a place to store your writing when you have it in digital form. So we're going to enjoy meeting with her. It'll be our first interview here in Fusion Writing. So look for it next week. Talk to you later. Bye-bye.